You're listening to the PuckUps podcast. It's time to hit the ice with Brian DeFelice.
Welcome into episode 3 of the PuckUps podcast. I am Brian DeFelice, and thank you all for being here. Last episode, we spent a lot of time talking about the rumored trade discussions between the Boston Bruins and the Calgary Flames surrounding right-handed shot defenseman Rasmus Andersson. And as it turns out, Andersson was indeed traded. It just wasn't to the Boston Bruins. He's now a member of the Vegas Golden Knights. So we'll talk about that trade and the fallout from it. The Boston Bruins, meanwhile, have won 6 games in a row in 8 of their last 9, following their most recent 5-2 win over the Chicago Blackhawks. So we'll touch on that game as well as their road ahead, because they have a tough schedule of games this week against some heavyweight opponents. Lastly, we'll finish the episode off with a Q&A from you, the listeners. So thank you all very much for submitting your questions, and I look forward to answering them. Before we get into all of that, I want to quickly remind you all on how you can hear the show and get involved. So you can subscribe to the PuckUps on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever else you get your podcast. You can reach out to me on Twitter at Brian DeFelice_, at the show, at the PuckUps. You can email me info@thepuckups.com, or you can leave a voicemail to be aired right here on this show by calling 617-539-6958. Again, that's 617-539-6958. So, with all of that said, the trade fallout. Rasmus Andersson, late last week and into the weekend, was rumored to be going to Boston. Now, nothing was set in stone, but there were rumors that the Bruins were the lead candidate to land Andersson, and that they were the only team that was given permission to discuss extension talk with Andersson. So naturally, he goes to Vegas, because Vegas gets whatever they want, whenever they want, ever since their inception into the National Hockey League back in the 2017-2018 season. I mean, really, it is uncanny. Every time there's a big ticket player on the trade market, he ends up with the Vegas Golden Knights. So, it really is comical at this point. You wonder how they even have the collateral to even make these trades anymore. I mean, since they've been in the league, they're not even a decade old, but they've been to 2 cup finals, winning once. They're a very aggressive team. And yet they still find ways to land these players. You would think that one of these days their reckoning would come, but then you look at their roster and you have Jack Eichel and Mitch Marner and Shea Theodore and Rasmus Andersson and Pavel Dorofeev, and the list goes on. Vegas just continues to be an incredible team ever since they've been in the league, and surprise, surprise, the Sin City wins again, and Andersson goes to Vegas, who, by the way, as I said in the road ahead, the Bruins will be seeing Rasmus Andersson and the Vegas Golden Knights in Boston later on this week. So that'll be fun to watch. But what happened? Because the Bruins were said to be, as I mentioned, the leaders in the clubhouse to acquire Rasmus Andersson. And last we spoke, we talked about how the asking price from Calgary to Boston may have been Mason Lohrei and one of Boston's 2026 first-round draft picks. They had their own, and then they have the one they acquired from Toronto in the Fraser Minton deal. So that's what we kind of speculated about. I had mentioned that, well, I don't know. I feel like it may not be the Bruins' 26th first-round pick or Toronto's that's in play. Maybe it's a 27 pick or later. So we'll get to that a little bit later on. But how did Andersson end up going to Vegas? Let's hear Elliot Friedman on the most recent 32 Thoughts podcast.
On
That's
Saturday
right.
night, when I talked about what I talked about, the Boston Bruins believed that they could get a deal done with the Flames and there would be an extension. Everything changed on Sunday morning, and Anderson's representative, Claude Lemieux, the former player, from what I heard, he called the Flames and he said, "We are willing to go to Boston, but we are not willing to do an extension, and we won't be doing an extension anywhere right now." And the world flipped, and the Bruins were out.
And rightfully so. If you're the Bruins, you cannot trade the assets that it would require to land Rasmus Andersson as a rental. If the player doesn't want to commit to an extension, which, by the way, is completely within Anderson's right. This is not me casting blame to him or trying to vilify him. He's within his right. He's a UFA at the end of the season. He doesn't have to sign an extension. But if that's the case and you're the Bruins, well, then sorry, Rasmus, but we're out. And so that's where things went awry for Boston and Anderson. It sounds like as late as Saturday night, he may have been willing to do an extension with the Bruins. And that includes the Bruins being willing to potentially move Mason Lohrei even after his fantastic game against the Blackhawks where he had 2 goals. We'll get to that a little bit later on. It sounds like Anderson's camp is the one who held this up, because even though it's the Bruins who eventually said, we're okay, no thank you, it's because of Anderson and his camp saying that they weren't willing to sign an extension, not only with Boston, but with anybody else. And so if you're the Bruins, you're not in a position to be signing rentals right now. It's just not in the cards. So what did Anderson go for ultimately? Well, he went to Vegas for right-handed shot defenseman Zach Whitecloud, a 2027 first-round draft pick, and a 2028 second-round draft pick, which will turn into a first if Vegas happens to win the Stanley Cup this season. Also, Calgary got a defensive prospect as well. So, and I believe Vegas is retaining, or Calgary's retaining half of Anderson's salary. So that's what it took to get him. Ultimately, Vegas is in a different spot than the Bruins right now. So it just wasn't worth it for the Bruins. But as I mentioned, it was speculated that the Bruins were shopping potentially Lohrei in their 2026 first round pick, or Toronto's 2026 first round pick. That's kind of the rumor that was going around over the weekend. But again, we'll go back to Elliot here on 32 Thoughts, and he has an updated version of what the Bruins were potentially willing to offer Calgary for Rasmus Andersson.
Now, there's one thing I do want to address here. There's been some reporting that Boston had Toronto's 2026 first in their offer. That is the pick that is top 5 protected this year. I've now heard from several places that pick was not there. It was not that pick that was available. I don't know which one was. I suspect Boston has 2 first-rounders in 2027. I suspect that it was going to be one of those 2. Maybe there was a condition there that it was the better of those 2. I don't know. But I suspect it was one of those 2 picks. But the 2026 first that Toronto's picked, the top 5 protected one, I've been told now from multiple places that one was not there.
So that's good to know. And that's reassuring as a Bruins fan that the Bruins weren't just out there floating their first round picks in 2026, because as I said last episode, I just think that those picks are going to be way too valuable. Now, if that indeed was what the Bruins were willing to give up, was Mason Lohrei and a 2027 first round pick for Anderson with an extension in place, that's a deal I do. Now, that's a deal that I do. But the lack of extension, it's a no-go right then and there. So end of the day, the Bruins saw an opportunity to try to improve their club in the here and now, and it just didn't work out. So onward and upward with the Bruins. And listen, it's been a great season for them so far, all things considered. They have been quickly rebuilding their prospect system over the last calendar year. Players like James Higgins and Will Zellers and Dean Letourneau and others. And you have 5 first-round picks over the next 3 seasons right now, as things stand. So, you know what? You don't want to do anything rash. And clearly, Andersson wanted to go to Vegas. I mean, he was rumored to have wanted to go there last offseason. If you're the Bruins and if you acquire Andersson with no extension, there is no guarantee he sticks around in Boston. Yeah, maybe he falls in love with the city, falls in love with the culture, the fan base. There are some fellow Swedes in Boston right now. You have Elias Lindholm, Hampus Lindholm, Victor Arvidsson. Nikita Zadorov is not Swedish, but he did play with Andersson in Calgary, so perhaps they're friends. So there's connections for Andersson in Boston, but ultimately he wanted to go to prom with Vegas. And if you're the Bruins, you don't want to play second fiddle to anybody. And so if it's not going to work out, then you take your hat out of the running, or your name out of the hat rather. So good for Boston to give it a shot while not being stupid with the assets they're willing to part with. And then again, kudos to them for having the willingness to drop out when it no longer made sense to them. Now, something that Elliot also mentioned on 32 Thoughts, which I found interesting, was that because the Bruins were so close to the finish line and they were so deep in negotiations with Calgary, he feels like other teams around the league now see what the Bruins were willing to part with. They look at Boston, they know that they have a need, top 4 right shot defenseman, legit top 4 right shot defenseman, and that they were willing to part potentially with Mason Lohrei and their 2027 first round pick. So Friedman is sitting there saying, well, maybe other teams around the league are looking at Boston and saying, hey, we could use Lohrei in a 27 first, and we have a player on term you may be interested in. So the Bruins didn't end up landing Andersson, but perhaps their efforts end up snowballing into something later on. It's something to keep an eye on. So Rasmus Andersson goes to Vegas. He does not go to Boston. And that's that, right? I mean, sometimes the best moves are the ones that you don't make. And in this situation, if you're Boston, you don't make that trade with no extension in place for Rasmus Andersson. So, okay, moving along to the Bruins and the Blackhawks. As I said, the Bruins have now won 6 games in a row and 8 of their last 9. They beat the Blackhawks 5-2. They get outshot 24-23, but I think the Bruins carried most of the play, especially in the first period, despite being down 2-0 after the fact. Nikita Zadorov gets called for a roughing penalty where he is committed to a hit on Tyler Bertuzzi in the corner, and Bertuzzi, he turns at the last second while Zadorov is already committed to the hit. They call Zadorov for the penalty. I disagree with the call. That is on the player being hit to not turn your back to, a player trying to hit you. I mean, now Zadorov is in a situation where he's going to hit Bertuzzi in the numbers, and that's just dangerous. But that's on the player. You have to have the responsibility as a player out there on, when you can control it, how you're hit, and protecting yourself. So I didn't like that penalty on Zadorov on the officials side of things. Now, the Blackhawks don't score on the power play, but they score in the seconds afterwards. So it's effectively a power play goal against, though it was 5-on-5. And then they miss a trip on Casey Middlestad. I mean, old friend Nick Foligno inadvertently trips Middlestad, but it disallows him from checking Kaiser, who gets the puck at the right point. He walks in all alone, beats Korpisalo 2-0 Blackhawks. So despite the Bruins playing really well in the first period, things didn't go their way on the scoreboard, and they found themselves down 2-0. But fortunately, they were able to claw their way back into the game and score 5 unanswered. It starts off with Charlie McAvoy getting his 3rd goal of the year. Elias Lindholm helps Jonathan Aspro win a puck deep in Boston's own zone in the corner, and Aspro finds Husnadinov in the slot. Husnadinov uses his speed up the ice, gains the offensive blue line, gives it to Pasternak at the right boards. Pasternak finds Elias Lindholm, who makes a really nice pass to Charlie McAvoy, who's coming in on the rush down the slot, and he makes it 2-1 for, 2-1 lead for the Blackhawks, but cuts their lead in half. So great play all the way around by a lot of players in Boston there. Mason Lohrei ties the game with his 5th goal of the season, his 1st of the game, 5th of the season. Again, it's a play that starts on offensive zone entry. Casey Middlestat pulls up, finds Pavel Zacha. Zacha with a stutter step, loses none other than Connor Bedard. He finds Hampus Lindholm, who finds Mason Lohrei. Lohrei with a really nice finish off a great pass from Lindholm, 2-2. That second line continues to give Boston a 3-2 lead. This time it's the 7th. Now, while Lohrei scored the second goal with the second line on the ice, it wasn't scored by a second line player. But then Victor Arvidsson gives Boston a 3-2 lead late in the second period. Again, great pull up by Middlestat. He finds Zacha. Finds Arvidsson. Arvidsson finds Zacha. Zacha back to Arvidsson. Great give and go. Boston 3-2 lead. That's the 7th game in a row where the second line had scored a goal. So they are feeling it, and they're playing some great hockey right now. And Victor Arvidsson, by the way, now has a 7-game point streak. That's 4 goals, 4 assists, 8 points in that span. Casey Middlestat has 6 points in 6 of his last 7, a goal, 6 assists, 7 points. And Pavel Zacha now has 9 points in his last 7 games, 4 goals, 5 assists. His 5-on-5 scoring continues to be really impressive as well. So that second line gives Boston the lead. And we talked about last episode of like, what do you do with Victor Arvidsson and Casey Middlestat? If a team comes calling for them, what do you do with them, right? So I think it's really important that second line's been playing as well as they have been, because you need that line to play well. You need top 6 scoring, and that line has been one of the better lines in all of hockey over the last 3 weeks, we'll call it. So good for them. And then in the third period, the Bruins continue to pile it on. Mason Lohrei gets a power play goal, nice snapshot from the top of the circle, and it's his 6th of the season. Now, Lohrei was all over these trade rumors, right? That was the other part of the Rasmus Andersson stuff, was who's going the other way. Well, it's Mason Lohrei, and he saw everything. He sees everything. Players see all the rumors. They see everything online. If they don't see it themselves, it's being sent to them from friends or family. He went into that game knowing his name was being talked about, and very well would have been on the move to Calgary had Rasmus Andersson on Sunday morning accepted an extension with Boston. So despite Lohrei's fantastic game, if Andersson's camp wanted to go to Boston with an extension, Lohrei's not here right now. So maybe it ends up being one of those trades where, the best trades you make are the ones that you don't, right? So we'll see what happens with that. But Lohrei didn't just play well offensively. I thought he was really good defensively too. He was physical. He was challenging guys, and it's good to see out of him. And then Marat Husnudinov closes the scoring for Boston. David Pastrnak goes 1-on-4. And to Husnudinov's credit, he goes flying up the ice right to the back post, and Pastrnak just finds him with a pass that not many players in the NHL can make. And so great goal. And there's just trust. There's trust and chemistry right now building with those two players. You see it. You see Pastrnak likes playing with Husnudinov, and obviously Husnudinov likes playing with Pastrnak. So the Bruins, a strong team win. A strong team win. One of the players that's not going right now is Morgan Geekie. And Geekie is goalless in his last 12 games. Over that stretch, he only has 3 assists. So he's clearly in a bit of a slump, and you can tell he's not playing with a ton of confidence. I feel like he's had some chances here and there, but there was a play against the Blackhawks where on the power play, Pastrnak found him for a one-timer, and it was one of those passes where the goalie was caught dead to rights. And if Geekie connects on the pass, it's a one-timer goal for him. And his stick snapped. His stick snapped in half. His shot wasn't able to get off, and that's just the way that it's going for Geekie right now. And I have no doubts that once he finds the back of the net again, he's gonna he's going to refine his confidence and the production will come. Right now, he's just in a bit of a grind. And you can tell that it's weighing on his mind because it's a subtle pickup, but he normally wears black tape on the blade of his stick, and lately he's been wearing white. So he's clearly trying to change things up. And, hopefully something ends up working for him. But yeah, it's definitely been a tough go for Geeky as of late. And the Bruins, as well as they've been playing, you're going to need Geeky to get going again if you want to get to where you want to get to. And that's a playoff berth. So I don't doubt it'll happen. But in the meantime, he's going to have to grind through it. So as far as the road ahead goes, it's going to be a grind for Boston. I mean, thank God that they have played as well as they have played lately, because if you haven't won 6 games in a row and you haven't won 8 of your last 9 and you have to go into Dallas and then you have to play Vegas and Montreal after what had previously been a 6-game losing streak to end out from the middle of December to the end of December, like those aren't teams you want to be playing when your season's not going too well. So the fact that the Bruins have kind of resurrected their season following their second 6-game losing streak of the year, it's great from a competitive standpoint. You want to be playing games that matter, especially in the second half and down the stretch. And right now, for the Bruins, they're playing such good hockey. This is a great time to play some of the league's best and see where you match up right now. I mean, Dallas has been in a bit of a slide lately, so they're not playing their best hockey of the year, but Vegas has won 7 games in a row. Montreal has been very, very good. I mean, in the Atlantic Division, this is how tight the Atlantic Division is right now. So right now, the Bruins are 4th in the division in points and 5th in points percentage. Right now, they have 58 points in the year with a point percentage of .592, a record of 28-19-2. So right now, Boston's 4th in the division in points and 5th in points percentage. But here's how thankless of a division it is right now in the Atlantic when you're winning games. Right now, winning games just keeps you afloat. It doesn't really give you much separation. Listen to these records in the last 10 games for Atlantic Division teams. Tampa Bay, 9-0-1 in their last 10. Detroit, 7-2-1 in their last 10. Montreal, 6-3-1. Boston, 8-1-1 in their last 10. Buffalo, 7-2-1 in their last 10. Toronto, 7-1-2 in their last 10. And then Florida and Ottawa, they're not doing as well. But those records in the last 10 games for 6 of the 8 teams in the Atlantic, I mean, that's insane. It is absolutely insane. So point being is the Bruins have a huge head-to-head against Montreal later on this week. I think it's on Saturday. Now, Montreal's a team that you're 1-1 against this year, but they spanked you. I mean, they spanked the Bruins in their last meeting in Boston, no less. Now, yeah, Elias Lindholm gave the Bruins what should have been a 3-2 lead right in the dying seconds of the second period, and ended up being waved a no goal on the ice, and then the Bruins didn't challenge it. It was a goal. It was arguably a goal. I would say I was 75% sure that it was a goal. If the ref had called it a goal on the ice, I think they would have had a tough time overturning it. But because it was called a no goal on the ice, you just never know with the officiating these days. But anyway, the game goes into the third period, now tied 2-2. And then from there, the Bruins just all air left the balloon, and Montreal just took it to them. Penalties piled up for Boston, and it was ugly. So a big head-to-head against a divisional opponent that you're chasing in the standings against Montreal on Saturday. So that's obviously a big one. But yeah, Dallas, you have to, Dallas and Vegas, I mean, if the Bruins want to make the playoffs, like, you have to win these games. I know you don't have to win them, but just generally speaking, you have to keep up with the Joneses, right? So if you go 0-2-1 in these next 3, and Tampa Bay, Detroit, Montreal, Buffalo, Toronto, if they keep winning, Well, now you're going to start to fall down towards Florida and Ottawa. And that's assuming that Florida and Ottawa don't go on some. So you know what I mean? It's a very vulnerable division right now to be in the mix. It's fun to watch from a standings perspective and from a fan's perspective of the sport. But the Bruins need to win 2 out of every 3 games for the rest of the year, pretty much. You have to have like a 667 winning percentage if you want to really be a playoff team at the end of the day. So I'm curious to see how Boston answers the bell against some really good teams in Dallas and Vegas. You've already lost to Vegas once this year with 7-5. The score was a bit more lopsided than the final score would indicate. I think Vegas was up like 7-3 or something like that before Boston kind of stormed back and made it a game. But you haven't seen Dallas yet, and they've been one of the best teams in the league despite their recent struggle. So the road ahead is not an easy one for Boston, but their siblings trip continues, and hopefully they're all having a good time on the siblings trip. So hopefully the Bruins can go undefeated with their family around them, and that would be awesome, and it would be great for Boston in the standings too. All right, let's finish off today with a little bit of Q&A from you, the listeners. So what I've done is I've tried to collect a lot of questions and comments that kind of came my way based on some of the rhetoric I was putting out there during the Bruins Blackhawks game. I had a lot of people commenting to me based on some commentary I had on the Rasmus Andersson rumors and all that stuff, but I just kept these comments to the Bruins Blackhawks game because the comments and such have more to do with current Bruins, and Rasmus Andersson is not a Bruin, so there's no sense in talking about that stuff anymore. We also have our first voicemails in PuckUps podcast history, and so why don't we go to those right now? Our first voicemail is from Lauren.
Hi, Brian. My name is Lauren. My question is, as we head into the second half of this season, is there anything that you think the Bruins need to change? And what do you think they need to keep doing that's currently working for them? Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Lauren. That's a very good one. Right now, the Bruins, as I said, they've won 6 games in a row and 8 of their last 9. So right now, you don't want to change a whole lot, but what is it that they're doing well? Well, one thing in particular that they have corrected over their last 6 or 7 games compared to the previous throughout the season is their discipline. They were the most penalized team far and away all season. And recently, they have been staying out of the penalty box, and that is huge because it allows you to play the game at 5-on-5. It allows your top players who normally aren't penalty killers, it allows them to not be stapled to the bench and be out of rhythm. It keeps your defense more fresh. It keeps your goaltender more fresh. Your penalty killers aren't as tired. You know, you're not getting fatigued as a team and out of sync as a team. So a big contributor to team success in any sport is discipline. And I would say that the Bruins have been a much better disciplined team lately, and that is one of the biggest reasons for success. Another big reason for success is offensive generation from the back end. I mean, the Bruins went a long stretch of this season with no goals from the back end, maybe one. But, you know, Charlie McAvoy has a couple of goals recently. Mason Lohrei's production has ticked back up. Aspro has had a couple of goals. Hampus Lindholm has had a couple of goals. Andrew Peeke has had a couple of goals. So, and then the assists as well. I mean, a lot of the defense are piling up assists too. Charlie McAvoy is, what's he up to now on the season? McAvoy has, I had it written down, but I don't know. I'll look that up afterwards. But McAvoy's assists, I think he's got around 27 assists on the year or something like that. So his production is better too. And then secondary scoring from the forwards. I mean, their scoring has been pretty good all year up and down the lineup. But again, as I said earlier, the second line has just been lights out. And especially with Morgan Geekie being quiet, to have Pavel Zacha going the way he's been going lately, to have Casey Middlestad going and Victor Arvidsson, but you need your top 2 centers to produce at 5-on-5 like top 2 centers. I don't think Elias Lindholm is ever going to produce in that way to the point where everybody's happy. But Pavel Zacha has the ability to make more plays on his own, I feel like, than Lindholm. So I would say you have to keep going with the discipline, and then just secondary scoring from your blue line and the players that need to produce in your top 6. So thank you for that question, Lauren. Let's go to a question here from Dave.
Hey, Brian. My name is Dave, and I want to know, do the Bruins' winning and losing streaks say more about their strengths or about their underlying weaknesses that get exposed over time? I'm curious to see your answer. Thanks.
Yeah, Dave. Well, the Jekyll and Hyde nature of the Bruins is one that definitely needs to be corrected and rectified, and hopefully their long losing stretches are out of their system for this season. I think their losing streaks spoke a lot about probably their lack of raw offensive talent, because while they're scoring pretty high as a team this year, they're doing so in a blue collar way a lot of times. And, when you don't have a lot of true difference makers and game breakers beyond David Pastrnak, when times are going bad to help pull you out of it, then sometimes things snowball. Again, as I said in Lauren's question, the discipline speaks to a little bit of immaturity in terms of taking stick penalties and over and over and over again, and not being able to stay out of the box is a sign of a team that's a little bit immature. But at the same time, many teams that suffer back-to-back, or not back-to-back, but who suffer multiple 6-game losing streaks over the course of a season, it's curtains for them. They cower, and they might not fight back from that. And the Bruins have, and I think that speaks to their mental toughness at times too. I think that the Bruins at times have showed immaturity in terms of discipline, but they've always been a hardworking team this year. So even when they've been immature, they've done so while still being hardworking, if that makes any sense. So the fact that their winning streaks are on the heels of big losing streaks, it shows their mental toughness and their stick-to-itiveness. And there's been a lot of change on this roster and on the bench with the coaching staff the last year plus. And sometimes it just takes teams time to gel and establish new roles and identities and take advantage of opportunities. So the Bruins are a team ultimately this year that's trying to figure out who they are as an organization. They're trying to identify their identity, which seems like a redundant statement, but that's exactly what they're trying to do. And sometimes it takes some hiccups along the way to figure that out. So thank you for that question, David. Lauren, thank you for your question. Now let's go to some tweets that came in over the last few days as well here. So this one is from Michael on Twitter, and Michael says, Brian, doesn't he have the hint of a young Brad Marchand on him? The tenacity, the puck possession, seems like the puck is always on his stick. Long way to go, but he's got something. Now, Michael's commenting in response to something I mentioned about Marat Husnudinov being on a half a point per game pace this year, 22 points in 44 games, and how he's building trust and chemistry with Pastrnak based on his efforts, on his second efforts on pucks, his forechecking, his skill, his creativity. And so Michael is referring to Husnudinov there. And yeah, Michael, I do think that there's a little bit of, I know it might sound crazy, right? Because Brad Marchand is one of the greatest Bruins to ever do it. And, his number will probably be retired in the Garden Rafters at some point in his career. And he's a Hall of Famer in my book. Maybe that's debatable. So yeah, it's high praise, but no one here is calling Marat Husnudinov the next Brad Marchand. But what we are doing is saying hey, he has some similar attributes that made Marchand successful. And not just Marchand, but a lot of guys. A lot of guys who are successful have that dog in them, have that motor, have that tenacity. So no, Marat Husnudinov is not, the next Brad Marchand. He's just, somebody who has similar qualities to a young Marchand, which in his work ethic and skill and creativity. Because a young Marchand who was on a fourth line to start his career, as was Husnudinov, he did have, more speed and skill and creativity than your typical fourth liner, obviously. So yeah, I think there's a little bit of similarities there, Michael. And I also think somebody else may have commented that too. Yeah, Bruins Burner 101 says, reminds me of Marshy, the way he forechecks in battles for loose pucks. Again, talking about Husnudinov. So yeah, we all kind of see those similarities. And I mean, if you're Marat Husnudinov and you have Bruins Nation noticing some similar traits in you that they've adored in Brad Marchand over the years, again, no one's calling Husnudinov Brad Marchand, but yeah, they both share similar attributes. There's no doubt about it. Here's another one on Husnudinov. Dave says he reminds me of Sergei Samsonov back in the day. Yeah, again, Samsonov was, he was a smaller forward, just like Husnudinov, just like Marchand. He was a great skater, just like Husnudinov, just like Marchand. He was crafty and skilled, just like the aforementioned two players I said. So yeah, I mean, you name it. A little bit of Marchand, a little bit of Samsonov, a lot of Husnudinov, obviously, right? Kuzi's his own player, but yes, there are definitely shared similarities. Here's a comment from Adam, again, in regards to Husnudinov, Neston's seventh player. So that's a good question. I think right now it's a three-way race between Husnudinov, Jonathan Aspero, and Fraser Minton. I think those three are a pick-em right now. Jonathan Aspero is an unbelievable story. What he's doing is so inspiring and so admirable. And I mean, he's right now, Hampus Lindholm came back into the lineup against Chicago and they kept Lindholm, on the third D pair right now because they don't want to take Aspero away from McAvoy. They don't want to ruin a good thing. So, Aspero is a guy who nobody knew who he was. He's definitely in the running for seventh player. And Fraser Minton, again, 21 years old, plays like he's 30, just a very mature beyond his years individual. So those three players right now, if the season were to end, it would be a pick 'em. We'll see which one of them can pull away from the pack and maybe win that award. And if all three of them continue to play as well as they are for the rest of the season, then we got ourselves quite the election for that award. I think Alex Steves and Mark Kastelik might be tier 2 candidates for this award. But yeah, Husnudinov, Minton, and Aspero, those three are the ones that I would go with right now. Which one of those three? Man, I really don't know. I honestly have no idea. Like, all three of them have just completely blown me away in different ways. So can't go wrong. I'll put it that way. Let's see. I also made some comments online about how dead wrong I was about the second line. Earlier this year, dating back to the offseason, I talked about how the origination and the concept of Middlestad, Zacha, and Arvidsson was not a line I was in love with, especially with Middlestad at center. I felt better with them with Pavel Zacha at center, but it's still not a line that I loved conceptually, and they have just proven me wrong. They've been, again, as I said earlier, they've been one of the better lines in hockey, and among the top 5, top 6 most consistently used lines in hockey. They played more minutes together than every single line in the NHL besides, I think, 4 or 5. So they've been very good. And I said as much online, and there was some comments about that. And this is a comment from X on X about the second line. He says, Mark Pavlich, John Harrington, and Buzz Schneider. Sometimes the sum of the parts is greater than any individual part. It just works. And then he goes on to say, now if we can figure out how to get Geeky some puck luck. And yeah, exactly. Geeky needs to feel good about himself. He needs to find the back of the net here soon. And I think he will. And once he does, he'll find some confidence. But yeah, X here is talking about one of the great lines from the 1980 Miracle on Ice USA hockey team, and that's exactly right. I mean, sometimes there are just lines that they just mix. They mix well. You wouldn't necessarily think it, and that's the beauty of sports, but also hockey here. Like sometimes you find just like individuals that just come together and make a great D pair when you wouldn't think they would. Jonathan Hasbro, Charlie McAvoy, right? Or a line of three forwards coming together to make one total line and just completely outperforming expectations and being, as X says here, greater than the sum of its parts. And I think that's exactly what Arvidsson, Middlestat, and Zacha are. They are greater than the sum of their parts, and that's admirable. Toady NJ on Twitter says, my surprise player pick, to your question, very early in the year, might have been preseason, is looking good. Honestly, give Sturm a lot of credit for putting him in a position to succeed and hasn't wavered from it. This is also in reference to Marat Husnudinov. And yeah, Toady NJ has a great point here. Marco Sturm, look at Husnudinov, look at Aspro, look at Minton. He hasn't, look at Steves. He has not been afraid to reward youth for youth and an experience when they deserve to be played. A lot of times coaches they'll defer to the guys that have been there and done that. Husnudinov, Minton, and Aspro, and Steves, they have not been there and they have not done that. But yet they're earning their spots, and Marco Sturm is giving them the ice time that they have earned. And so Marco Sturm deserves a lot of credit for that as well. Yes. Let's see here. New York Patriot says he's getting an extension on July 1. That's in reference to a comment I made about Pavel Zacha, who has been playing some really good hockey as of late as well. I've mentioned his 5-on-5 scoring. He had 8 5-on-5 points in the first 41 games of the season. He now has 8 5-on-5 points in his last 7. So he has 16 5-on-5 points this year, and half of them have come in the last 7 games. So if that doesn't tell you how important he has been to Boston's success, nothing will. And speaking of extensions, somebody here, I'm trying to see what the Webster on Twitter says, think he'd sign a team-friendly deal or no? Again, talking about Pavel Zacha. Yeah, I think he would. I think that Zacha's making $4.75 right now. That's a very team-friendly deal. With the cap going up, I think that Zacha could be in line to make like 6.5 on his next contract or something like that, something similar to Geeky maybe. But with the cap going up, it wouldn't be that bad. It wouldn't be that much of a portion of the percentage of the team's cap space because of the cap going up. So I think you'll see a world where Zacha gets his raise, but it is still a team-friendly percentage of their cap space. And I think both player and team want to be together long-term, and I think they'll come together on an agreement. Let's see here. Chuck on Twitter says, with some stretch performance in the remainder of the season, the Bruins could have 7 or 8 20-goal scorers. That would put them in the top tier of teams winning the cup over the past decade. Yeah, Chuck, I mean, I haven't done the projected goal totals for everybody in a few weeks, so I would have to do that. Maybe that's something we can come back to next episode. But yeah, I mean, no doubt about it. Like if that's the case, to have 5+ 20-goal scorers on a team where his offense was highly questionable heading into the year, especially depth scoring, and that's exactly what you have if you have 7 or 8 20-goal scorers. That just speaks to the team this year and how they're getting it done by committee. Arnold on Twitter says, next 2 games, big boy hockey. Let's see what this team's got. This is the time to evaluate. Yeah, Arnold, I couldn't agree more. And that's kind of, when we talk about the road ahead, right? This is when you want to play some of the best teams in the league when you're playing your best hockey, right? And so, yeah, Dallas, Vegas, Montreal, Boston on a 6-game winning streak, winners in 8 of their last 9, charging towards the playoffs, trying to keep pace with everybody else. Big boy hockey is right. So I'm curious to see how this week goes for Boston. It starts with Dallas on Tuesday, and then you got Vegas on Thursday, and then Montreal over the weekend. So very much looking forward to how Boston does, and hoping for some wins, for some continued success. Thank you all very much for listening. Enjoy Boston and Dallas on Tuesday night, and I will be right back here on Friday morning to talk to you all. Have a great week.